It'll be over soon, sweetheart. You just need to stay strong a little longer.
The stale, antiseptic air of St. Augustine's children's ward always knotted my stomach. For 12 agonizing months, this sterile purgatory had become a second home, a place where hope and despair performed a sickening, relentless waltz. Ethan, my bright, energetic 8-year-old, was now a pale shadow, his laughter replaced by shallow coughs, his vibrant curiosity dulled by endless tests and the constant prick of needles. Doctors mumbled about rare infections, autoimmune responses, a string of baffling diagnoses that never quite fit. I, Henry Bolton, a Walmart manager who once wore a badge and saw the worst of humanity, felt utterly helpless. This helplessness, however, was about to curdle into something far darker. I was returning with a lukewarm coffee, the kind that tasted like regret, when I heard their voices drift from Ethan's room, a low murmur just beyond the slightly ajar door. Donna, my mother-in-law, a retired nurse whose presence had become cloyingly constant, was speaking. "It'll be over soon, sweetheart. You just need to stay strong a little longer." Her voice was thick with a syrupy sympathy that had always grated on me, but now, something in its cadence felt off, carnivory. Then Lila, my wife, the woman I'd vowed to cherish, laughed. It wasn't a laugh of relief or hope. It was a brittle, conspiratorial sound that slithered down my spine like chilled oil. "As long as no one finds out, Mom. That's the main thing. We stick to the plan." The plan? What plan? My hand, holding the coffee, froze. The world tilted. Ethan's labored breathing sawing through the silence from his bed was the only sound that felt real. My ex-cop instincts, dormant but never dead, flared to life. I fumbled for my phone, thumbs slick with a sudden cold sweat. Tap, tap, swipe. The recording app icon glowed. I held my breath, pressing the phone closer to the gap in the door, praying the slight tremor in my hand wouldn't give me away. "The insurance policy is quite substantial, isn't it?" Donna mused, her voice dropping further. "Enough to clear all our debts. Start fresh." "He'd want us to be looked after, Lila. You know Ethan would." Lila murmured something I couldn't quite catch, a dismissive sound. Debts? We weren't drowning, not that I knew of. My manager's salary was steady. Lila worked part-time as a fitness coach, more for her own satisfaction than financial necessity. Unless there were debts I didn't know about. Secrets. The word echoed in the sudden roaring silence of my mind. The conversation faded as a nurse bustled past, her rubber soles squeaking on the linoleum. I pulled back, heart hammering against my ribs like a frantic bird, stumbled towards the desolate waiting area, the coffee forgotten, its contents sloshing unnoticed over my hand. The recording icon still pulsed on my screen. Proof. Of what? I wasn't entirely sure yet, but it was a start. A cold dread, far deeper than the fear for Ethan's health, was seeping into my bones. These women, my family, were they monsters? That night, back in our quiet suburban Louisiana home, the air thick with the scent of crepe myrtle and deceit, I began my own investigation. The house felt alien, every shadow a potential hiding place for secrets, every familiar object tainted. While Lila showered, her humming a grotesque counterpoint to the turmoil in my soul, I slipped into Ethan's room. His nightlight cast long, dancing shadows. On his bedside table, amongst the get-well cards and stuffed animals, sat his array of medications. My eyes scanned the labels, names I'd come to know by heart. One bottle, a liquid antibiotic, looked different. The cap wasn't screwed on quite as tightly as I usually left it. I picked it up. The liquid inside, usually a cloudy white, seemed slightly clearer, almost diluted. My blood ran cold. Had they started already? Was this plan in motion? I took a tiny, sterile syringe from a new pack I'd bought for flushing Ethan's feeding tube when he was at his worst, drew a small sample, and sealed it in a Ziploc bag, hiding it at the back of my tool shed. Then, I installed the first of the micro cameras, tiny lenses disguised as screws, as USB chargers, as innocuous parts of the household decor. One in Ethan's room, one in the kitchen, one in the living room. Every interaction, every hushed conversation, every damn pill administered would be recorded. My descent had begun, not with a roar, but with the silent, chilling click of a recording device. The betrayal was a cancer, and it was already metastasizing. The cliffhanger now became the realization that they were tampering, the pill bottle confirming the insidious nature of their words. I found the prescription medicine, Ethan's essential heart medication, looking strangely off. The normally opaque pills seemed to have a finer dust. some slightly chipped, as if they'd been clumsily handled or, God forbid, replaced. The tampered heart medication was a visceral shock, transforming chilling suspicion into sickening certainty. My home, once a sanctuary, now felt like a meticulously crafted stage for a horrifying play, and I was the unwitting audience, slowly realizing the script. The rehook was visceral. I replayed the previous night's footage from the newly installed camera in Ethan's room. Donna had entered at 3 a.m., ostensibly to check on him. She'd lingered by his bedside table, her back to the camera, for a full 2 minutes before silently exiting. Not enough to prove anything concretely, but enough to feed the inferno of my paranoia. My son's life was a ticking clock, and the hands pointing towards disaster were those of his mother and grandmother. "I need your help, Jeff," I said, my voice raspy, into the phone the next morning. Jeff Raymond, my best friend since the police academy, now a razor-sharp defense attorney, was the only person I could trust. We met at a grimy diner well outside our usual haunts, the air thick with stale coffee and unspoken anxieties. "Henry, you look like hell," Jeff observed, his brow furrowed with concern as I laid out the transcript of the hospital conversation, the photo of the suspicious pills, and my initial frantic theories. He listened intently, his expression shifting from disbelief to a lawyer's cool assessment. "Insurance fraud escalating to... Christ, Henry, this is dark. We need more than just a snippet of conversation and a gut feeling about pills. We need undeniable proof." "I know," I bit out, the frustration a raw wound. "I'm recording everything. Audio, video. I need to know who else is involved, if anyone." "Be careful, man," Jeff warned, his eyes serious. "You're walking a razor's edge. If they suspect you're onto them..." "I know," I repeated, the words tasting like ash. The surveillance became my obsession. My job as Walmart manager, with its predictable hours and mundane demands, became a flimsy alibi for my real work, tracking Lila. Her hospital supply runs became my primary focus. She claimed she was picking up specialized formula for Ethan, or a new type of bandage. Instead, the GPS tracker I'd discreetly placed in her car often led her to a local gym, Bondi Rhythms, a trendy fitness center on the outskirts of town. Peering through the grimy window of my parked car, concealed by the oppressive Louisiana humidity and overgrown banana trees, I saw her, not sourcing medical supplies, but laughing, her body close, too close to Trent Vero. He was a local gym coach, all sculpted muscle and carnivory charm, the kind of man I'd instinctively disliked even before this nightmare began. Their interactions weren't just friendly, they were intimate, charged. My fists clenched. Was he in on it too? Or just a pawn in her game, a distraction? The financial tendrils of their treachery were next. Digging into our joint accounts revealed nothing amiss, just the usual household expenses. But Lila had become increasingly secretive about her own finances. Using a spyware program, Marcus, a tech whiz I knew from my police days, had helped me install on our home computer. I accessed her private emails. There it was, statements from a secret bank account, opened 3 months prior, co-signed by Donna Carver. Regular, large deposits were being made, sums that Lila's part-time coaching job couldn't possibly account for. Were these advanced payments? A slush fund for their fresh start? Each discovery was another nail hammered into the coffin of the life I thought I had. One sweltering afternoon, as I was reviewing footage, my phone buzzed. It was Mrs. Henderson from next door, a kindly, elderly woman who often watched Ethan play in the yard. "Henry, dear," she began, her voice quavering slightly. "I don't want to alarm you, but I was just checking my security footage from yesterday, since those teenagers were joyriding down the street, and I happened to catch something by your side window where Ethan's nanny cam faces outward sometimes." My breath hitched. The nanny cam in Ethan's room. We hadn't used it for internal monitoring in months, but it was still there, sometimes capturing the driveway if angled right. "What did you see, Mrs. Henderson?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "Well," she hesitated, "I saw Donna, your mother-in-law. She was outside Ethan's window late last night, and she was carrying a small vial, it looked like. She seemed to be... Well, it looked like she was trying to put something through the screen. It was very odd, dear. I just thought you should know." A small vial. Through the screen. My blood turned to ice. The window was often left slightly ajar for ventilation. The cliffhanger landed with the chilling finality of a capital punishment. They weren't just tampering with his known medication. They were introducing something else. Something surreptitious, right under my nose. Mrs. Henderson's words echoed in my skull, a horrifying soundtrack to the images now replaying in my mind. Donna, a shadowy figure at Ethan's window, a vial glinting in the moonlight. The rehook was immediate and sickening. I tore through the house to Ethan's room, checking the window screen. Tiny, almost invisible tears near the bottom edge. My stomach churned. I raced to my hidden surveillance monitor. The footage from Ethan's internal camera, the one I'd placed, showed Donna entering his room later that same night, the night Mrs. Henderson had seen her outside. She'd leaned over Ethan, ostensibly to adjust his blanket, her hand darting towards his mouth for a split second. Not administering medication from his prescribed bottles. Something else. Something hidden. Ethan's condition, which had seen a fragile plateau, took a nosedive. His breathing became more ragged, his small body racked with tremors. The doctors at St. Augustine's were baffled, suggesting increasingly esoteric and desperate treatments. I couldn't tell them what I suspected. Not yet. Not without concrete, irrefutable proof. The recordings were damning, but context was everything, and they could still twist it. "Dr. Ramirez," I said, cornering Ethan's pediatrician in the hospital corridor, my voice tight with a desperation I could barely contain. "His decline is too rapid, too unnatural. Are you sure we're not missing something? Could it be an external factor?" Dr. Ramirez, a compassionate woman with tired eyes, looked at me intently. "Mr. Bolton, I share your concerns. His inflammatory markers are through the roof. His system is fighting something ferocious, but we can't pinpoint the source. Frankly," she lowered her voice, "some of his symptoms are atypical for the diagnoses we've considered, almost like a reaction to an unknown substance. I've ordered a full toxicology screen, but it will take time. Foul play." She suspected it too. The word hung in the air between us, heavy and unspoken. Donna, meanwhile, was a masterclass in manipulation. She'd fuss over me, bringing me sandwiches I couldn't eat, offering comforting and I didn't believe. "Oh, Henry, you look so worn out," she'd coo, her hand resting on my arm, her touch feeling like a spider's caress. "You need to let Lila and me take some of the burden. We're family." Her eyes, however, held a cold, calculating glint that belied her sympathetic words. They were watching me, gauging my reactions, ensuring their sufferer remained unsuspecting. The tension finally snapped in the sterile, impersonal environment of the hospital parking lot. Lila had just arrived, late as usual, phone pressed to her ear, a tight smile plastered on her face as she ended her call, probably with Trent. "Where the hell have you been?" I snarled, the dam of my restraint finally breaking. Years of swallowed frustration, now amplified by a terror so profound it threatened to consume me, erupted. Lila recoiled, her eyes widening. "I was picking up supplies. What's wrong with you, Henry? You're acting crazy." "Crazy?" I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "My son is dying, Lila, and you're off doing God knows what with God knows who. Don't you even care?" "Of course I care," she shot back, her voice rising, drawing stares from passing nurses and visitors. "How dare you suggest otherwise? I'm his mother." "Are you?" I spat, stepping closer, my rage a living thing between us. "Or are you just waiting for the insurance check to clear?" Her face went pale, then flushed a dangerous red. "You're delusional. Stressed out. You need help." "No, Lila," I whispered, my voice dropping to a deadly intensity. "You need to be stopped." The argument raged, a public spectacle of our crumbling marriage and my unraveling sanity. Words were flung like weapons, accusations met with theatrical denials. It ended with Lila storming off, leaving me shaking, the sympathetic gazes of strangers burning into my back. I had shown my hand, perhaps too much. The carefully constructed wall of normalcy was crumbling. That evening, as I sat by Ethan's bedside, holding his frail hand, the monitors beside him began to scream. A cacophony of alarms, shrill and piercing. Nurses and doctors flooded the room. "He's in arrest! Cardiac arrest!" someone yelled. The world dissolved into a blur of frantic movement, shouted commands, the rhythmic squeak of the CPR machine. My son, my little boy, was dying right before my eyes. The cliffhanger was the ultimate fear realized. Ethan's heart giving out, the direct consequence of their monstrous, escalating cruelty. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor, slow but steady, was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard. Ethan had survived. Against all odds, the doctors had pulled him back from the brink. The rehook was this fragile, terrifying hope, underscored by a new, cold resolve hardening within me. While Ethan fought, I would fight harder. The cardiac arrest was their near-fatal miscalculation, the catalyst for my awakening from grief-stricken father to methodical hunter. With Ethan stabilized, I retreated to the sterile quiet of the hospital chapel not to pray, but to plan. Pulling out my laptop, I connected Lila's phone, which I'd managed to grab during the chaos of Ethan's arrest when she'd left it on his bedside table. Marcus Yates, my tech-savvy friend, had previously walked me through accessing deleted files and backups. My fingers flew across the keyboard, navigating through layers of erased data. And then I found them. Voice notes. Not just deleted, but shredded from the main storage, lurking in the deep recesses of the phone's memory. One was Lila, her voice tight with a strange excitement, talking to Donna. "He's weaker today, Mom. The new stuff. It's working faster than we thought. The payout will be even bigger if it's complications from his existing condition, right?" Another, chillingly, was Donna, humming a lullaby, then whispering, "Almost there, my sweet boy. Grandma will make sure everyone is taken care of." It was incontrovertible. The raw, unadulterated evil of their plan laid bare in their own words. Detective Clara Mendez was the first official I approached. I'd known her vaguely from my time on the force. She had a reputation for being thorough, fair, but cautious. I met her at a neutral coffee shop, laying out a condensed version of my findings. The initial recorded conversation, the suspicious medication, the voice notes, omitting my own illegal surveillance methods for now. "Mr. Bolton," she said, her expression unreadable as she reviewed the printouts. "These are serious allegations, horrifying ones. But voice recordings can be challenged. What you have here is disturbing, deeply disturbing, but we need more to move on it officially, especially against family members." She was sympathetic. I could see it in her eyes, but her hands were tied by procedure. "I can start looking into the insurance policies discreetly, see if anything flags, but you need to understand, if you've obtained any of this evidence illegally—" "I understand, Detective," I said, my voice flat. I knew the risks. My next step was to escalate my surveillance. I purchased more sophisticated audio bugs, tiny transmitters that could be hidden almost anywhere. One went into Lila's purse, another into Donna's favorite hideous floral living room lamp. The house, Ethan's hospital room, they were already wired. I began meticulous legal documentation, logging every suspicious event, every recorded snippet, cross-referencing them with Ethan's medical charts, building a timeline of their cruelty. Jeff reviewed everything, his face growing grimmer with each new piece of evidence. "This is building, Henry," he'd said. "It's building into something monstrous." The bugs paid off spectacularly. One afternoon, I listened, stomach churning, as Lila and Donna discussed Ethan's life insurance policy in sickening detail. "Triple indemnity if it's accidental or due to unforeseen complications," Donna said, her voice smug. "That little clause dear old Frank insisted on for his own policy, bless his departed soul, I made sure was in Ethan's, too. We'll be set for life, Lila. Florida, maybe? Or a nice cruise to start." "As long as it looks natural," Lila replied, a nervous tremor in her voice. "The doctors are already suspicious. That Ramirez woman keeps asking questions." "She has no proof," Donna dismissed airily. "Just a mother and grandmother grieving over a tragically sick child. We just have to play our parts convincingly." They laughed, a sound so grotesque it made me want to vomit, joking about the payout while my son fought for every breath. That evening, I returned home from the hospital to find Trent Vero waiting for me in my driveway. He leaned against his flashy sports car, arms crossed, a smirk playing on his lips. "Bolton," he drawled, his eyes sweeping over me with open contempt. "Lila tells me you've been acting erratic, asking questions, making accusations." "This is my property, Vero. Get off it," I said, my voice low and dangerous. The sight of him, so smugly intertwined with Lila's treachery, ignited a fresh wave of fury. He pushed himself off the car, taking a step towards me. "Lila's worried about you. And when Lila's worried, I'm worried. Maybe you need a little perspective adjustment. Stay away from her. Stop maltreating her, or things could get unpleasant for you." His hand twitched toward the waistband of his jeans. My ex-cop senses screamed. He wasn't just a lover, he was an enforcer. The threat was palpable, hanging heavy in the humid Louisiana air. Trent showing up at my home, delivering a direct physical threat, was the cliffhanger. The moment the conspiracy's reach extended beyond the whispers and into outright intimidation, Trent's smug threat was the spark to a fuse that had been shortening for months. The re-hook was instantaneous. His menacing presence on my property, the implied violence in his stance. All the fear, the grief, the suffocating rage I'd been swallowing erupted. Before he could react, before I even consciously decided to move, I lunged. My years on the force, the muscle memory of countless takedowns took over. The surprise was total. I slammed a fist into his solar plexus, doubling him over, gasping. Another to his jaw sent his head snapping back. We crashed into the side of his ridiculous sports car, the alarm blaring in protest. The fight spilled into the open garage, a brutal, desperate ballet of adrenaline and fury. He was younger, fitter, a gym coach used to physical exertion. But I had the desperate strength of a man pushed to the absolute limit. He landed a glancing blow to my temple, stars exploding behind my eyes, but I barely registered it. I was fueled by images of Ethan, pale and struggling in his hospital bed, by the sound of Lila's and Donna's venomous laughter. I dodged a wild swing and drove my knee into his thigh. He staggered, and I grabbed a heavy wrench from my workbench, not to use it, but its cold weight in my hand was a grim promise. "Get out!" I roared, my voice raw. "Get out and never come near my family or my home again!" He scrambled back, eyes wide with a mixture of pain and dawning fear, no longer the confident hunter. He saw something in my eyes, a line I had crossed. He stumbled out of the garage, clutching his ribs, his smirk gone. The adrenaline drained, leaving me shaking, the wrench clattering to the concrete floor. My knuckles were red, my cheek throbbing. I looked at my reflection in the dusty pane of the garage window. A wild-eyed stranger stared back. This wasn't justice. This was something uglier, something primal. Henry Bolton, ex-cop, Walmart manager, grieving father, was morphing. The sufferer was becoming a hunter himself, and a small, cold part of me relished the shift. The moral ambiguity washed over me, not with guilt, but with a chilling sense of inevitability. A few hours later, a smirking Trent, flanked by a weaselly lawyer, served me with papers. Attack charges. He threatened to sue me into oblivion. I called Jeff immediately. He attacked me on my property, Jeff. I defended myself. I omitted the wrench, the sheer ferocity of my counterattack. I curated the narrative, self-defense. Jeff sighed. "We can argue that, Henry, but this complicates things. It gives Lila ammunition." He was right. Detective Mendez called me in. "Mr. Bolton," she said, her earlier sympathy replaced by a stern professionalism. "I'm getting conflicting reports. Mr. Vero claims you attacked him without provocation. Now, there's a formal complaint." She was looking at me differently now, not just as a potential sufferer of a horrific crime, but as a potential perpetrator of violence. My carefully constructed image was cracking. "I'm also hearing whispers about your surveillance, Mr. Bolton. Unofficially, of course. You need to be very careful." Clara was now quietly investigating me, too, the lines blurring. The final blow came later that week. I was at the Walmart, trying to maintain a shred of normalcy, when two uniformed officers approached me. "Henry Bolton?" one asked, his voice devoid of emotion. "You're under arrest." "Arrest? For what?" I demanded, a cold dread gripping me. Customers stared, whispering. My face flushed with humiliation. "Domestic violence. Attack against your wife, Lila Bolton." My mind reeled. Lila. She wouldn't. She couldn't. But the officers were already cuffing me, the cold steel snapping around my wrists. Lila had fabricated an attack, a desperate, vicious move to discredit me, to silence me. As they led me out, past the gaping stares of my colleagues and customers, I saw her car pulling away from the edge of the parking lot. The cliffhanger was brutal and public. My arrest, based on Lila's false accusation, the ultimate betrayal designed to paint me as the villain and completely derail my efforts to expose her. The rehook was the clang of the cell door, a sound of utter finality. The stench of stale sweat, unwashed bodies, and despair filled the holding cell. I was shoved inside, the heavy door booming shut behind me, plunging me into a dim, oppressive reality. Rock bottom. My face throbbed where one of the arresting officers, a friend of Trent's no doubt, had accidentally slammed me against the car door. Lila's accusation of domestic violence, bolstered by Trent's earlier attack claim and, I later learned, cleverly bruised makeup she'd applied, was enough. The judge, citing my escalating pattern of violence and flight risk due to the severity of the alleged crimes against his wife, denied bail, planted evidence, a torn shirt of Lila's I'd never seen before, a faked, hysterical 911 call she'd made, sealed my immediate fate. I was trapped, the system I once believed in now an instrument of my enemy's design. Jeff was a lifeline in that suffocating darkness. "They're good, Henry. I'll give them that, he said grimly during a brief supervised visit, his voice tight with frustration. Lila's crying crocodile tears. Donna's wringing her hands, playing the concerned mother. They've painted you as a man unhinged by his son's illness, lashing out. But Jeff wasn't just delivering bad news. He was fighting. While I languished in jail, he was digging, relentlessly pursuing the threads I'd given him. He cross-referenced the secret bank account deposits with Donna's pension payouts and uncovered a series of unexplained cash withdrawals from her retirement fund just before the deposits into the secret account. She's been liquidating assets, Henry, funding this fresh start. Meanwhile, a small miracle occurred. Ethan, still fragile but out of immediate danger, began to talk more coherently. One of the older, more experienced nurses, a woman named Shirley who'd seen too much to be easily fooled, sat with him patiently. "Sweetheart," she'd ask gently, "do you remember anything making you feel extra sleepy or giving you a tummy ache? Anything besides your regular medicine?" Ethan, his small face pale against the hospital pillows, nodded slowly. Grandma gave me a new drink sometimes, said it was special juice to make me strong. It tasted funny." Shirley documented it meticulously. A child's innocent words, a tiny chink in Lila and Donna's armor. The story, with its salacious mix of a sick child, alleged domestic misuse, and now whispers of something more sinister, was irresistible catnip for the local media. "Ex-cop accused of abusing wife while son fights for life," screamed one headline. My mugshot, grainy and unflattering, was plastered everywhere. I was being tried and convicted in the court of public opinion, my reputation shredded. Then the news that truly shattered my world arrived, delivered by Jeff, his face ashen. "Henry, Trent Vero, he's been found dead." The air rushed out of my lungs. "Dead? How?" "Strangled," Jeff said, his voice barely a whisper. "In his apartment. The police, they found fibers under his nails. Fibers consistent with the shirt you were wearing when you were arrested for the alleged DV, planted again. Lila and Donna weren't just trying to silence me. They were trying to bury me, strangled. It was a close, personal method of eliminating. Something Donna, with her nursing background and surprisingly strong hands, might be capable of. Or Lila, fueled by desperation. The cliffhanger was devastating, Trent dead, and all evidence pointing squarely at me. I was no longer just an accused misuser. I was now the prime suspect in a homicide investigation. From sufferer to pariah, my descent was accelerating into an abyss. The outline mentioned a chase scene, Henry ambushed by Trent's friend. This could be reinterpreted as Jeff being ambushed while investigating for Henry, or it could be that I'm expected to show Henry being ambushed by Trent's friend while he is on bail before the homicide accusation, but the outline implies he's refused bail. Let's assume the planted evidence for homicide is the main point. The chase element is less critical than Henry being blamed for the homicide. The fibers are a strong way to blame him. The news of Trent's homicide and the planted evidence should have broken me. Instead, as I sat in that bleak interrogation room, Detective Mendez's disappointed, accusatory gaze burning into me, something inside me didn't just break, it calcified. The rehook was this chilling transformation. The grief, the fear, they were still there, but now overlaid with an icy, unadulterated rage. If they wanted a villain, I'd give them a villain they'd never forget. Jeff, bless his tenacious soul, worked miracles. He found a security camera from a neighboring apartment building that caught a grainy image of a woman, build consistent with Donna, entering and leaving Trent's building around the estimated time of passing, wearing a hoodie and a baseball cap. It wasn't conclusive, but it was enough to cast reasonable doubt on my involvement, especially since I had an ironclad alibi. I was already in police custody for Lila's fabricated attack. The homicide charge, while still hanging over me like a guillotine, didn't stick immediately. After an agonizing week, I was released on bail, the DV charges still pending, but the immediate threat of a life sentence for homicide momentarily receding. The taste of freedom was bitter, tainted by the knowledge of what I had become and what I was about to do. Retribution mode activated. My first target was the system that enabled Donna. Her years as a nurse had given her connections, including a few less than scrupulous members on the St. Augustine's hospital board. I'd found emails, encrypted but eventually cracked by Marcus, detailing kickbacks Donna had facilitated for a specific medical supplier during her tenure, implicating 2 current board members. Armed with this, I arranged a chance encounter. "Mr. Davies, Mr. Chen," I said, my voice smooth as silk as I cornered them in the hospital cafeteria. "I believe we have a mutual interest in discretion." Their faces paled as I laid out printouts of the incriminating emails. Donna Carver's continued association with this hospital in any capacity, even as a volunteer, is problematic, as is any further impediment to my son's unbiased care or any complications with official inquiries into his treatment. The blackmail was unspoken but clear. Their cooperation was swift. Donna's visitor privileges were suddenly restricted, her subtle influence curtailed. Next, the financial revenge. The secret account Lila and Donna had so carefully built, Marcus had already flagged its vulnerabilities. While they were busy framing me for homicide, I initiated a series of complex transfers, routing the money through offshore accounts and finally into a secure crypto wallet under an alias Jeff helped set up. Nearly $80,000, their nest egg for a fresh start, vanished into the digital ether. They wouldn't discover it for weeks, too preoccupied with the escalating chaos. Trent's gym, Body Rhythms, was next. He might be dead, but his legacy was tangled with Lila's. An anonymous tip-off to the city council, replete with falsified but convincing photographic evidence of multiple code violations, faulty wiring I'd noticed during my surveillance, unsanitary conditions in the smoothie bar, a detail I creatively embellished, and non-compliance with disability access was all it took. The gym was slapped with crippling fines and a shutdown order pending review. Lila's part-time coaching income, and whatever illicit perks she got from Trent, dried up instantly. The fight scene with Donna's lawyer happened during a preliminary hearing for Lila's domestic violence claim. Donna, attempting to portray herself as a frail, concerned grandmother, had hired a pit bull of a lawyer, a slick, arrogant man named Peterson. During a recess in a crowded court hallway, Peterson got too close, hissing in my ear, "You're going down, Bolton. We'll make sure you never see your son again." Something snapped. Maybe it was his cologne, cheap and cloying like Donna's perfume. Maybe it was the smug certainty in his eyes. I didn't throw a punch. I simply shoulder-checked him, hard, sending him sprawling into a water fountain. Papers flew. His expensive suit was soaked. "Stay out of my face," I growled, the ex-cop menace back in full force. Chaos erupted. Court officers swarmed. It was reckless, stupid, and incredibly satisfying. Jeff dragged me away, hissing, "Henry, what the hell are you doing?" But the message was sent. I was no longer playing by their rules. My final act in this phase was surgical. The most damning audio clips, Lila and Donna discussing the insurance payout, their cold dismissal of Ethan's suffering, Donna's lullaby confession, were edited into a concise, horrifying montage. Using a VPN and a series of anonymous proxies, I uploaded it to a dozen video-sharing sites and sent the links to local news outlets and social media influencers with a single typed message: the truth about Ethan Bolton. The cliffhanger was the click of the upload button, unleashing my carefully curated evidence into the wild, a digital bomb set to detonate their lives. The rehook was the deafening silence of the internet for the first few hours, then the explosion. The audio clip, titled "Whispers in the Ward, the Agony of Ethan Bolton," went viral overnight. It started with local Louisiana bloggers, then regional news aggregators, and finally, national media outlets picked it up. Donna's smug pronouncements about the triple indemnity and Lila's callous agreement interspersed with Ethan's faint, unknowing coughs in the background of one recording were a public relations nuke. Donna, who had been volunteering at a local clinic to maintain her caring grandmother facade, was unceremoniously fired, the clinic issuing a public statement distancing themselves from her appalling alleged conduct. Lila, attempting to go to her now-shuttered gym, was hounded by a scrum of reporters, their camera flashes like machine tool fire, microphones shoved in her face. "Mrs. Bolton, is it true you plotted your son's end?" "What about the insurance money, Lila?" She looked terrified, cornered, a satisfying mirror of how I'd felt for months. My manipulation of social media was relentless, yet invisible. I fed anonymous tips to true crime forums, created fake profiles to share the audio with parenting groups, stoking the flames of public outrage. I used Marcus's skills to subtly boost the posts, ensuring they stayed at the top of trending lists. #JusticeForEthan and #Monsters Inc., a particularly vicious tag aimed at Donna and Lila, began trending. Donna's carefully cultivated image as a pillar of her church community crumbled. She was asked to step down from her role as church treasurer, the congregation recoiling from her in pious horror. Her nursing license, already under scrutiny after my initial quiet complaints through Jeff, was summarily suspended pending a full investigation by the state board. Her professional life was eviscerated. The Child Protective Services investigation into Lila, initiated by an anonymous call, mine naturally routed through a voice distorter and burner phone, was swift and brutal. Given the viral audio and Ethan's still precarious health, they saw no option but to temporarily remove Ethan from any potential contact with Lila, pending a thorough assessment. He was placed under the temporary guardianship of the hospital, with heavily supervised visitation only for me. Lila's world was imploding. Her son, her reputation, her financial security, all gone or rapidly disappearing. The most damning piece of evidence, however, came from Ethan himself. During a supervised visit with a CPS worker present, I accidentally left my phone recording on the bedside table. Ethan, more lucid now, was talking to his favorite nurse, Shirley. "Sometimes," Ethan whispered, his voice small and hesitant, his eyes darting towards the door as if expecting Lila or Donna to appear. Mommy gave me the wrong pills. She said they were new vitamins, but they made my tummy hurt and made me too sleepy to play." He hadn't mentioned this before, perhaps too scared or confused. It was a gut punch, even to me. I knew Lila was complicit, but to hear Ethan confirm she actively administered something harmful, Shirley immediately documented his statement, her expression grim. This new recording, legally obtained through the CPS worker's presence and Ethan's voluntary statement to a trusted caregiver, was pure gold. The viral audio, Donna losing her nursing license, the CPS investigation, it was all building. Detective Clara Mendez, who had been forced to view me with suspicion, now had a tidal wave of public pressure and new potent evidence pointing directly at Lila and Donna. The final shot of this part, the cliffhanger, was Mendez, her face set with grim determination, walking into her captain's office. I later learned from a contact Jeff had in the department that she formally requested to reopen the investigation into Ethan Bolton's suspicious illness, this time with Lila Bolton and Donna Carver as the primary targets. The tide had turned, unequivocally. The hunters were now the hunted. The fluorescent lights of the family courtroom hummed, a stark counterpoint to the simmering tension. The rehook was the judge's stern face as she called the custody hearing to order. Lila sat across from me, flanked by a new, cheaper lawyer, her face a mask of brittle defiance. Donna was conspicuously absent, reportedly too distressed to attend, more likely too scared. The air crackled with unspoken accusations. My domestic violence charges had been dropped due to inconsistencies in the complainant's testimony, and Jeff's relentless dismantling of Lila's story, especially after the viral audio had painted her as a proven liar. Now it was about Ethan. "Mr. Bolton," the judge began. "Miss Bolton, we are here to determine the immediate custodial arrangements for Ethan Bolton, pending the outcome of ongoing investigations by law enforcement and Child Protective Services." Lila's lawyer launched into a rambling defense, painting her as a grieving mother misled by an overbearing parent, Donna, now a sufferer herself of a vicious smear campaign orchestrated by a vengeful husband. It was a pathetic, desperate performance. When it was Jeff's turn, he was calm, precise. He presented the CPS reports, Ethan's documented statements to Nurse Shirley, the medical evidence of unexplained substances in Ethan's system that aligned with the periods of Donna's and Lila's unsupervised care. Then Jeff said, "Your Honor, we have one final piece of evidence, a recording made during a CPS-supervised visit of Ethan Bolton, in his own words." He played the clip, Ethan's small, hesitant voice describing how Mommy gave me the wrong pills. The courtroom was silent, save for Ethan's tiny, damning accusation. Lila gasped, her face crumbling. "And, Your Honor," I said, standing, my voice ringing with cold clarity, my pre-agreed moment with Jeff to deliver the final blow. "There's something more. Something the police now have." I looked directly at Lila. A recording not of whispers, but of clarity. Of you and your mother, explicitly detailing your plan to end my son's life for insurance money, recorded the day I first overheard you. This was the original recording I'd made, the one I'd held back, the one that detailed amounts, motives, solidification of their intent beyond just vague phrases. It was my ace. As if on cue, the courtroom doors burst open. Detective Mendez strode in, flanked by two uniformed officers. "Lila Bolton, Donna Carver," Mendez announced, her voice devoid of emotion, though Donna wasn't present. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit homicide, aggravated attack on a child, and insurance fraud." Lila shrieked, a raw animal sound of pure terror as the officer cuffed her. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Reporters who had been lurking outside surged forward. Amidst the pandemonium, the judge banged her gavel. Order, order. Custody of Ethan Bolton is awarded solely and immediately to his father, Henry Bolton. Later, as the circus died down, Jeff looked at me, a strange expression on his face. That first recording, the one you played today, more detailed than what went viral. You've had that clear version all along, haven't you? You could have gone to the police much earlier. Saved Ethan. Saved yourself some of this. I met his gaze, my own unreadable. Perhaps. A flashback, sharp and cold, played in my mind. Me, listening to that first horrifyingly clear recording a year ago, realizing the depth of their evil and making a choice. Not just to stop them, but to let them dig their own graves so deep they'd never climb out. To let the poison spread until amputation was the only very public cure. I hadn't just waited to act. I'd orchestrated their self-immolation, letting them believe they were succeeding, all while I gathered the fuel for their pyre. My vengeance required not just their downfall, but their utter, unrecoverable destruction. That night, Ethan was asleep in his old room, safe. I packed a single bag. Before I walked out, I picked up my phone and dialed Lila's new court-appointed lawyer's voicemail. I knew she'd get the message in her holding cell. Lila? My voice was a low whisper, devoid of any emotion but a chilling finality. You took my son's light. Now you'll live in darkness. This isn't over. It's just the beginning of your end. I hung up, dropped the phone on the table, and walked out into the Louisiana night. The cliffhanger was my disappearance, leaving behind only that chilling voicemail, a promise of more suffering for Lila, and the unsettling revelation of my calculated patient cruelty. 1 year later. The rehook was the crinkle of cheap prison stationery. Lila's letter, penned in a shaky, desperate hand, began, Henry, I know you hate me. I deserve it. But please, tell me about Ethan. Is he okay? Does he ever ask about me? Donna's, arriving a week later, was more self-pitying, filled with Bible verses and pleas for forgiveness, blaming Lila's weakness and her own misguided love. They wrote from separate state penitentiaries, their dreams of a fresh start, reduced to cinder-block walls and the monotonous clang of prison life. I read them both with a detached, clinical interest, then tossed them into the wood-burning stove that heated my small, isolated cabin deep in the Montana wilderness. Henry Bolton was a ghost, erased by a new identity, a new life sculpted from the ashes of the old. The Louisiana Walmart manager, the ex-cop, the grieving father, they were all dead and buried. In their place stood a lean, weathered man with haunted eyes and an unshakable purpose. Ethan was not with me. He was at a prestigious, austere military academy on the East Coast. I visited him once a month, our interactions brief, formal. He was thriving in the discipline, the harshness a strange comfort after the chaos of his early years. During my last visit, he'd asked, his voice stiff, "Why did Mom do it?" I'd looked at my son, seeing the man he was becoming, the steel forging in his young soul. "Weakness, Ethan," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. "Weakness of character. It infects everything. It eliminated your mother in a way. Don't ever let it infect you." It was a brutal lesson, but the world I was preparing him for was brutal. I was ensuring he would never be a sufferer again, even if it meant sacrificing his childhood innocence on the altar of my cynicism. The final confrontation wasn't one I'd sought, but Lila had forced it. Using her one compassionate relative, an elderly aunt, she'd managed to find out which false name I might be using during a meticulously scheduled, untraceable wire transfer for Ethan's school fees. She'd then petitioned for a supervised visit, citing her rehabilitation and maternal rights. The system, ever flawed, had granted it. The prison visitation room was a symphony of muted despair, crying children, hushed arguments, the hollow click of the guard's shoes. Lila sat opposite me, separated by thick plexiglass. She was thinner, her vibrant energy extinguished, her eyes dull with a permanent, weary sorrow. "Henry," she whispered, her voice cracking, "you came." "You requested it," I stated, my tone flat. "Ethan? He's strong, resilient. Does he hate me?" she asked, tears welling. I watched her, a specimen under a microscope. There was no flicker of the old Lila, the manipulative fitness coach, the laughing conspirator. Just a broken woman, And for a fleeting moment, a ghost of what I once felt for her, a phantom limb of a dead love, twitched. I crushed it. He's learning to survive, I said. Something you failed to do. Her tears fell freely now. I'm sorry, Henry. God, I'm so sorry for everything, for Ethan, for us. I live in hell every day. I leaned closer to the glass, my voice a barely audible whisper, a secret just for her, the final twist of the knife. Lila, you need to understand something. This was never about justice for Ethan. Justice is a fairy tale. All of this, was about watching you burn. Every step, every revelation, every moment of your public humiliation and private agony. That was my design. Her face, already pale, turned ashen. The last vestiges of hope in her eyes died, replaced by a dawning, soul-shattering horror as the true extent of my cold, calculated vengeance finally registered. The finality of my evil became her new prison. I stood up and walked away without a backward glance, the sound of her choked sobs swallowed by the prison's indifferent hum. My victory was complete, not in the triumph of good over evil, but in the utter annihilation of my enemies, orchestrated with the patient, burning precision of a true villain. He never looked back. Not once. She was already gone.